You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Veterans Action Council. We are with the Roundtable number 27. We have a very special guest with us tonight, a gentleman that I met on Hash Church, and just an amazing all-around gentleman and a Navy veteran, Wade Laughter. He has been joining us recently, and we have composed some questions, and I guess we'll just kind of jump right into things right out the gate there. So why does cannabis have the effect it does in your body, Wade?
Not to go too deep into this hole, but there's recent science has discovered a system in our bodies called the endocannabinoid system. And it's called that because it was discovered as part of the research done back in Prohibitionary era about why cannabis had the effects that it does, and specifically why it was so bad, because it was a Schedule I narcotic. And anyway, Raphael Mechoulam and others in Israel isolated CBD and then THC, and by marking THC molecules and having volunteers who were willing to ingest or take those molecules into their bodies, they found where THC had effects in our bodies. And it turned out that we have cannabinoid receptors, and they're called all of these things because they were just, the system was discovered as part of the research about cannabis and how it affects our bodies. And the endocannabinoid system, we still don't really fully understand the full implications of the endocannabinoid system, but it is basically the regulator that helps, I'm talking to veterans, so we can talk about hierarchies, ranks, if you will. You can start off with cells in our bodies, and each individual cell, most of them in our bodies, have cannabinoid receptors. These are sites on the cells that receive compounds that the cannabis plant makes, as well as compounds that our own bodies make. And that's the real key of why cannabis has the effects that it does. Our endocannabinoid system has three components, if you will. The cannabinoid receptors, and then there's the cannabinoids that our bodies make called endocannabinoids. And then there's enzymes that our bodies produce that break down or metabolize the cannabinoids that our body makes. Otherwise, we'd be running full steam ahead all the time. And to go back to that hierarchy image, and you start off with cells, cells group together, similar cells, to make tissues. Tissues group together to make organs. And organs work together to make systems in our bodies. And the systems of our bodies all have to work together so that we enjoy life and what we call health. And so when you go back to the cellular level, where cannabinoid receptors can be triggered by the presence of endocannabinoids that our bodies would be making if we were enjoying full health, those endocannabinoids, many of us are deficient in them. And the cannabis plant happens to make compounds. CBD and THC are two of them, but there are many others that happen to very closely on a molecular level mimic the compounds our bodies would be making if we were in full health. And part of why the endocannabinoid system is so important is not only does it help all these cells and tissues and organs all work together and talk to each other, they're the communication system, if you will, but it helps to balance the system so that certain essential functions can happen in our bodies. And the functions of the endocannabinoid system can be briefly summarized by appetite, mood, the ability to forget, particularly traumas, the ability to heal, and to respond to threats, to infection, to disease or injury. And all of those functions are controlled by this endocannabinoid system that we only discovered 25, 30 years ago. And that system, I feel like most human beings alive today are somewhat deficient in endocannabinoids. We evolved, I'm a science kind of geeky guy, and so I really get the concept of evolution. And when you think back the last 100 years of human beings, we have for years we made rope, we made sails. The Declaration of Independence, the original copies were written on hemp paper. It was a militarily necessary commodity. There were wars fought over availability of hemp. And I think that over time, like the feed animals that we ate consumed cannabis. I know of farmers who work cows that use hemp to help cows that are struggling in their health. Much cheaper than antibiotics and whatnot, and meantime good for your cows, and they're more efficient at producing milk, et cetera, et cetera. Well, meantime, we evolved eating whole foods. We didn't, most of everything you go to the store today and find in the grocery store, that's not what we evolved eating. Anything that's in a box or a carton or a 5-minute rice, that's devoid of nutrients that I think our bodies count on in order to make endocannabinoids. We have polluted our environment with, I took organic chemistry in college, loved it. One of the things I've come to realize is one of the miracles of organic chemistry is we've created literally millions of compounds that we've released into our environment. We have no idea how they work or what effects they might have on our systems as well as the environment we live in. All of these are challenges to our endocannabinoid system's health. Stress is another big impactor to endocannabinoid tone or health. And so I think part of what's happening in our culture today, across our entire culture, is the increase in certain illnesses or disorders that tend not to respond well to the medicines that we have, but do surprisingly respond fairly well to cannabis. That's the right chemistry, the right dose, the right method of getting that dose into your body, the right method of the right frequency of use, et cetera, plays out with benefits that can seem miraculous when you first look at them. I think of some of the seizure disorder kids I've known. One particularly compelling story, a child went from 6 years old, male, having literally hundreds of seizures a day, every day. The condition is diagnosed as Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And we found a plant, made an oil from it, provided it to the family. Literally on Friday night, after a day of seizing, they gave the first dose to this child. He slept through the night without seizing. They continued to give him doses the next day. For 4 months, no seizures. From hundreds of seizures a day to none for months from a plant. And that looks like a miracle, but what you realize at some point as you really dig into what's actually going on was there was some combination of cannabinoids and terpenes, and that particular plant had about 2.5 times the amount CBD to THC. It had beta-caryophyllene, linalool, and another terpene that seemed relevant. That's an example of a most extreme example, if you will, of how cannabis can have effects in the body. But for the general population, and particularly for veterans, many of whom are dealing with injuries and or wounds from their service, be they physical, mental, or emotional, I think it's a crime that those veterans do not have access to information about how the plant might be of help to them, as well as access to the products that can be made from the cannabis plant. And that was a really long-winded rant about why cannabis has the effects that it does in the body. But it really comes back again to the endocannabinoid system and the fact that the endocannabinoids that our bodies would be making to control all of the systems of our body, we're not making due to stress, poor diet, environmental toxins, lack of sleep. The list goes on, but here we are experiencing a number of conditions that do in fact seem to respond favorably to the right chemistry and dose of this plant. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I promise I won't always be so long-winded.
No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there's a lot to that. And as you've shown, there's a depth to it. It's not just a surface conversation, because, when I was first getting into cannabis activism, it was, cannabis can save the world. Yum can save the world. Nothing bad can be known about cannabis, but we didn't have science behind us. We didn't have the understanding of the endocannabinoid system, or that it had its correlation between cannabis and THC and CBD. So, and they're, becoming actually, locks for keys that we used to produce, as you say, but now we've found artificial means by, however, our ingestion method that is actually helping us achieve homeostasis. And when you are sick, and if you've been stressed, or you have really pushed your body and mind and soul to the edge, when you finally reach a true homeostasis, it's an epiphany to so many people. And it's a shame that we have met so many people due to their illnesses, as opposed to the populace as itself, because they are, the populace as its general point is cannabinoid deficient across the board, which means the majority of our population is literally walking sick, and they don't know it, know why, understand why. But for some reason, when they use cannabis or they use different combinations, CBD, THC, it has an effect on insert illness here, their stress levels here, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a layered discussion and goes so deep to everything that we ingest, what a patient is using, what is their medication, what is their history of medication, all these things, how much rest are they getting, exercise. We're not really taught that so well in Western medicine, and it's not, or it's not fostered or continued in the way that Eastern medicines and others tend to do so. So I think even though you feel it was long-winded, as my response is extremely long-winded, it was, carrying to the point that, there's a lot to this. All right. I think Councilmember Crowitz, you have a question for Councilmember Laughter.
So we had a very simple question, and I'm going to try to instigate you to go deep on this by making it a little bit longer. And the question was simply, why do you do what you do? But I'm going to make it a little longer by saying this. I see a little bit of a pattern here, and let me just describe the pattern. Okay, so you got a handful of military veterans that have stepped up and are doing things that are pioneers and leading, but doing things that, in my opinion, should have already been done. And I'll give you 3 examples, right? One of them is Jack Hare. Jack Hare, military veteran, runs a head shop, reads this paper that Mike Aldrich had in his PhD stuff 10 years earlier in New York on hemp, and how you can do this and that with hemp, and how the president of Washington grew it and separated the males from females and everything. That was his PhD dissertation where he found that stuff. It led a whole campaign in 1970. Was in 1971 with the first Prop 19 campaign. It was all under that George Washington grew hemp, that was it. But anyway, Jack was driven by that, and basically is known as the father or even the grandfather of the hemp movement. But again, that was something he picked up in the 70s that Michael had published in the 60s. And then Dennis Perone, military vet, comes in with this buyers club and this idea based on some local initiatives to do a state initiative, and working with others around the state, basically pioneers the medical marijuana movement. But again, that was 1996, talking about medical marijuana that we had pioneering doctors like Mikaria and Grinspoon and Weil and others publishing in the 60s and 70s and 80s already. And then, there's this guy that finds this interesting cultivar, puts it up there. I think the rest of the story. That's your story. And this is CBD was discovered, as I understand it, isolated in the 1940s. The cannabis movement found very little interest in it. A couple of expats went over to Amsterdam and came up with some interesting stuff that led to GW Pharma's products. But by and large, we didn't think much of it. I don't know why do you do what you do, and why do you have to, is the add-on there.
Yeah, I especially love that last part. Why do I have to? That's a really good observation. Well, at least part of why I do what I do is I've come to really love the plant. Jack Herrera's book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes, was certainly formative in my view, if you will, about cannabis. The Women's Alliance for Medical Marijuana down in Santa Cruz was another inspiration fairly early on. The model of you could access medicine that you might need by working in the garden, and it being a cooperative effort. And and then on a more personal level, part of what drove me, especially later in my life, to be so involved with cannabis was personal need. I have a fairly aggressive I'm really good at making ocular pressure, which is a problem that expresses as glaucoma. And as I sit here right now, I'm mostly blind in one eye, and I still see pretty good with glasses in the other eye. But back when I was diagnosed in '95 with glaucoma, the eye drops that I was given had really good medical insurance, blah, 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 made me profoundly ill. It was a real problem. And so since then, I basically used cannabis, because even then, pre-96, the federal government allowed that, well, for some reason or another, cannabis does seem to help with glaucoma. So, and I lived in San Francisco at that point. It was fairly easy to find cannabis of all different sorts. but a consistent supply and quality issues came to my attention, if you will. And I realized that if I really wanted good quality and to know that there was no funny business, no sprays or things I didn't want to breathe into my lungs, that I'd have to grow it myself. And so I did. I started growing in a little closet and quickly realized that was ridiculous. Then a garage, then the full basement of a fairly large home, and then a warehouse in the South of Market area of San Francisco. Those last two situations were under the auspices of a patient group. We had a collective. Because fairly early on, back when I was first producing flowers that I was willing to share, one of the first people that I was sharing with was a fella who had been a Navy diver who was dying of prostate cancer. And he had big lesions on his skin, and he was fairly late stage, but he reported that he really loved the herb that I was giving him. And it just helped me, I don't know, it kind of inspired me to realize that there must be something going on with this. I spent some time doing emotional support, volunteer work with the one of the AIDS project nonprofits in San Francisco. That brought it home even stronger to see people who were literally wasting away from not being able to eat to having appetite again. And it wasn't reversing their condition, but it was enhancing their quality of life. And that matters. And I think the really basic answer to your question, Michael, is I care about people. There is a lot of suffering in this world. And I think that anything any one of us can do to reduce the amount of suffering that's happening in this world, one should do that. So that's why I do this. I love the plant, and it just seems like the thing to do. It does no harm. All of the criminality and harms that have happened around cannabis have to do with prohibition, to making it a criminal act to work with this plant. And look at all the harm that's been done there. One of the things that drives me today is the dream that someday our culture would understand that we are, for the most part, cannabinoid deficient, and that our medical system, one of the real challenges to me of our medical system is it's set up such that nobody gets paid until somebody's sick. And so there's not a real strong interest in keeping people healthy. There's no profit in it, at least. But that being said, you know, our medical system, they do the best they can with what they have. And all kinds of miraculous things can be done in the medical system. But I come back to the endocannabinoid system again. Healing comes from within us. Our bodies do the healing. Medicines, hospitals, doctors, therapies, all of those things can help in the healing process. Ideally, they do, and do no harm. But healing has to happen from within our bodies. It's motivated by, on the practical level, if you will, the endocannabinoid system. But I can go all woo-woo on you and start talking about spirit. And I think that one of the ways that cannabis can be of help, particularly to veterans, is in healing the spirit. One of the features of military service is you give up your personal identity to a large extent to unit and uniform and country and whatnot. And I think there's some value there. But a veteran who's no longer in that paradigm needs to reclaim their identity, to reclaim their place in society. And it's my experience that cannabis can be of help to that. And again, it's just stigma left over from prohibition and the fact that the people who make the rules in our country under our form of government are, for the most part, people who look like me but think pretty differently than I do on this topic. Can we leave it there?
All right. Next question will go to Alex, council member.
Thank you, Etienne, and thank you, Wade. My question is, if cannabis is best dealt with as a medicinal herb and it doesn't really fit into the mold of modern medicine, how can we best employ it inside this rigid medical system, especially like the government-run VA system, VA hospital system?
Well, you can't basically right now. All of the, particularly at the federal level, I think the VA is really focused on the idea that cannabis could somehow be turned into a single molecule pill that will make it all better. You can look at the Food and Drug Administration in the last couple of years, for the first time in many years, approved a medication called Epidiolex for Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet syndromes, two particularly nasty versions of epilepsy. And Epidiolex is basically isolated CBD in a carrier oil. It's not a great product. The kids I know who qualify for that medication, and it's insanely expensive if some government entity's not paying for it. I think it's $30-some thousand a year. But these kids are being asked to take 2,000, 2,500 milligrams of CBD a day. That story I told earlier about that 6-year-old who went from having 100 or more seizures a day to having none. His dose today is at about, last I heard, it was around 250 milligrams of CBD over the course of a day. And he's getting about 150 milligrams of THC and some CBG in his formulations. And they're having good enough success that he's actually going to school. And we've just recently been able, his father has secured permission from the school district. If we can formulate his product into individual doses, the school nurse will give it to him at school. Huge win in California. The challenge with the VA and, quite honestly, most medical research, all randomized double-blind clinical studies have to be done with isolates. Whole plant medicine, you can't standardize it. It's not easily repeatable. George was talking about having found a cultivar that worked for him in our conversation the other day, and that he was able to get a little bit and then it was gone and it wasn't any more available. And this is an ongoing problem for folks who actually need cannabis. We have to change the rules. We have to change the system. I know that, I believe here in California, I don't know if the governor has signed it, but there's supposed to be some legislation moving to allow hospitals to dispense, or to allow patients in a hospital to receive cannabis preparations. I'm not up to speed on the details of it. That's what we have to do. We have to change what's possible. We have to assert patient rights to try their own medicines. And part of that is educating the medical establishment. Early when we first jumped on the call here this afternoon, I was telling a story about a conversation I was having with a friend who's a doctor and researcher at a major medical institution. And she's reporting that there's great enthusiasm across many departments at that teaching center about cannabis and its potential effects in their fields of study. So it is changing. It's going to take time. I was talking with another activist this morning about trying to change cannabis law in the United States, and it feels a lot like water wearing away at a rock. It happens over time, but it's taking a long time. And the tragedy is there's many people who need it today. Some of them are probably listening to this conversation, and the tragedy is we're not doing enough to make this plant and the products that can be made from it available to those who most need it. It's, the adult use recreational market is great. We got here because of medical need, and we're leaving those people behind. And that's another part of why I do what I do. I want to see people have access to quality products that address their needs.
Right on. Next question is from Councilmember Armstrong. Councilmember.
So first of all, Wade, I would like to thank you for being here tonight, and personally thank you for all that you do. We need more people like Wade in this world, and especially in the cannabis industry. So I really appreciate you joining us. My question, would Harlequin ever likely be working in a field of THC restrained plants? In other words, did the fact that the field was unrestrained and was being grown with other THC plants is possibly part of the reason that it developed? And then to add on to that, I would ask you what you think of as far as mixing cultivars, what we've done to that in the last 15 years. I'd like to hear your overall thought about it. But as far as Harlequin goes, I think the question is mostly, we have all these THC restrained fields around here. And is that another thing where prohibition is preventing the production of, or the finding of these life-saving cultivars?
Multi-dimensional question, George. Well done. On Harlequin being affected by the plants around it, I think there is a thing that goes on. Cannabis is a grass, a weed, if you will, and particularly if its roots are able to mingle with other plants of similar type. I have, in my experience, seen traits move across different cultivars. But Harlequin, part of what made Harlequin significant, and as well known as it is that it had an abundance of CBD, and the cannabinoid profiles are pretty locked in by the genetics of the plant. You're not going to see a big shift in my experience. I'm not a plant biologist per se. I have some experience with it, but in my experience, yeah, you're not going to change the cannabinoid types and their relationship to each other in quantity very much. You can significantly enhance how much of them there are on the plant by the conditions that it's in and how well it's doing. And when I'm talking about traits moving across cultivars, I was growing years ago, back when I was working indoors, I was growing some a plant that was dramatically purple in a tray with some plants that typically did not turn purple. And the ones that usually were purple still were purple, maybe not quite as vivid as they normally were, but the other ones definitely took on a purple tint. And they definitely were sharing roots in that bed. It was an ebb and flow type situation. to get geeky for a second, but in a field where you're surrounded by, I think what you mean by THC deficient fields is hemp fields, right? One of the things that I have a lot of issues about hemp, but one of the things I like about hemp is there's a lot of work being done to find new cannabinoids in the cannabis plant, in the hemp space. And that's good, because I think that the cannabinoid, it's not just about CBD or THC. I think there's some other things going on in this plant that will turn out to be really important. And I don't know that I answered your whole question, George. I feel like I've left something out. Go for it.
Yeah, I think what you left out is just the part that I added on at the end. You explained very well about Harlequin and its relationship with the plants around it. But what do you think about, where America and California basically has taken these plants and crossing the genetics and as we all know, you get a good cross. It produces a lot of medicine, and in our medicinal world, that's what you end. So you end up getting a bunch of crosses of this one plant that happens to cross well with other genetics. And so I just big picture, what do you think about the genetics that we're doing?
Great question. Not an easy answer. I'd almost have to say I'd like to talk about type 1, type 2, and type 3 cannabis. The type 1 cannabis is primarily THC, and there's an amazing diversity of those plants out there in the world, and more of them being created every day. Not that many of them are what we would think of as stable seed lines. And I don't know that that's good or bad. It feels like the limited experience I have working with THC predominant cultivars these days, vital, strong versions seem to be a little harder to come by, but that, again, I limited contact there for me personally. I grew a couple of THC plants this summer, and they did quite well. And yeah, I got the seeds from a seed company, and I'm looking forward to making some hash with them. On the type 2 cannabis, which is Harlequin, among others, there's many others. I think there is some good breeding happening there. I've seen a number of different products coming out on the market that are anywhere from 4 times the amount CBD to THC to 4 times the amount THC to CBD. That whole range in there is to me, even up to 10 to 1. There's real interesting possibilities in there, and not just because of CBD and THC being together, but many of those cultivars are producing minor cannabinoids in some abundance. And again, I think this is something of interest to those in need. And for a lot of conditions, I really have for years tended to steer people towards type 2 or type 3 cannabis. Type 3 cannabis, many hemp cultivars fit into type 3. They're predominantly high CBD, not much THC. But again, in the hemp space, one of the things that's really nice that's been happening in the last few years is a lot of novel cannabinoids. And for example, I heard recently that there's a plant that's come forward that produces just CBG, no THC, no CBD. And yet, and its whole plant. I'm looking forward to seeing what other cannabinoids might be in it. So I on the whole, I'm not discouraged about the state of the cannabis plant genetics. I feel like CBD has had the effect of balancing the global plant and the interest in the various cannabinoids that the plant can make for our well-being. And yeah, I that's all I got on that.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor? If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Cannabis edibles are an effective way to manage pain and other ailments, especially when you deal with your trusted partner, Legacy 420, in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. You see, we lab test every product on site to ensure proper dosage every time, which is critical when consuming cannabis edibles. All Legacy 420 edibles are made by our classically trained baker and chocolatier, and we also have super tasty vegan options.
Our baker has been in the industry for 25 years. She's also a chocolatier. Everything from savory to sweet, your chocolate bars, brownies, butter tarts, you name it, we make it.
Talk to our knowledgeable Cannatex about our incredible variety available. Give your trusted partners a call. Legacy 420 out on your road.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Sweet.
Councilmember Krawitz.
Yeah, man. That's the idea of creating a global balance with the CBD is brilliant. That's a very interesting point. The focus on THC and where that's led. Yeah, I can see your point there. It's very interesting. Food for thought. I'm gonna have to go with that. But I wanted to run it a little bit further down the rabbit hole on a side point of that last question, which is it's something, again, back to Jack Herr. We had talked about the THC levels of hemp, and he was railing about the low THC hemp that they were doing in Europe. I guess it's a point. I don't know, whatever it is, it's less than 1%.
I think they got to do 0.2.
Yeah, it's way under 1% hemp. And
0.03.
What he was saying was just environmentally, and in terms of how many pesticides he needs and things like that. He was saying something along the 2.5% THC was more appropriate. When I've looked at it, it seems like just if I were to just draw an arbitrary line based on something that made sense to me, it would be 5%, because under 5% really isn't of much interest to people that want to smoke it, but yet it doesn't really restrain farmers that are growing hemp. It seems to be a range that they can work in. And my concern is that what we have here in US federal law is 0.3%, I think it was, THC. So that restricts the cultivars very, very strongly that they can play with out there in the field. Somebody recently brought up the fiber. I don't know, how accurate this is, but it's something that they had researched led them to believe that you couldn't really do a very good fiber crop with such a low THC number, which wouldn't surprise me given the these facts. So yeah, just I don't know, just so I can put that out there for you to comment on. I mean, it goes to that, could you have ever even discovered a Harlequin under those circumstances? Would have ever even been discovered? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that it would have. I'm going to circle back to something you started off with, Michael, about hemp. To me, one of the real tragedies of what happened with the Farm Bill was deciding that industrial hemp would be defined by how much of a certain specific cannabinoid might be present in the plant. It would have made much more sense to define industrial hemp as any plant producing less than 5% total cannabinoids, whatever. And now you're growing cannabis hemp for fiber, for hempcrete, you're not mining cannabinoids. And that's really what we've created by this artificial, non-biological, non-botanical definition of hemp, making it based on one specific cannabinoid. It's part of why the Delta 8 thing is such a headache nightmare going on right now. But that would involve, undoing or changing federal law, which, as you guys know better than I do, is quite a challenge. But it's a shame. And meantime, yeah, if I was a THC farmer working indoors in a warehouse and got those original seeds, hoping for a cultivar that would be a beautiful hash maker, because I like hash. I like to smoke hash. It's really my preferred method of ingestion. And yeah, so, I was seeking THC experience and my patient group, for the most part of how the Harlequin is a jokester, it's from an opera many, many years ago. And yeah, the court jester was the Harlequin. And it had a multicolored costume and it played jokes all the time. And this plant played jokes on me. I thought I had a great THC-rich, hash-producing, vital, beautiful mother plant going. And I had, for the first time ever, patient group members bringing back product we'd given them because it wasn't giving them the effects they were hoping for. And I thought I'd made a huge mistake. And the one person who reported that his pain was eliminated, it was really dramatic to him how much difference it made when he smoked a joint of this stuff that he didn't like. That was the other interesting thing. He was bringing it back because it didn't get him stoned, but he also noticed that it happened to not, his pain went away. So if it had been in a field of hemp, no, it would have just gone to biomass. But as it was, I thought I had a special thing that was going to help me make great hash. And so I was I was providing it to my patients, and they were bringing it back. Yeah, it would not have been found, I think, on a hemp farm. It might have been if somebody had really been paying attention, but in a hemp field, you've got hemp farmers grow acres of seedlings. It's hard to pick one out of a whole bunch that stands out like that. So, yeah, I don't think Harlequin would have happened had she showed up in a field instead of in a little warehouse in San Francisco.
Alex, you have a question.
Thank you, Etienne, and thank you again, Wade. This is another one of those multi-part questions. You can pick as much or as little of you'd like to speak on. So you were just talking on the, the various type 1, type 2 types of cannabis, and that's what I was thinking about. So what role do you believe, strains like Harlequin and just cannabis products and flowers with different cannabinoid ratios, other than type 1, what role do you think those will play? Like, obviously for nerve pain and other things, there's definitely efficacy there. And do you think more consumers and patients will start finding that they enjoy cannabis with these ratios as things become more mainstream and they're made more available in more markets?
Well, great question, Alex. I hope so. I'll say it like that, because what's true is our culture, and for the most part, many people, most people who consume cannabis today are doing so because it gets them high, and they like that. And I'm not here to judge that. I happen to enjoy it very much myself. But I also have had the opportunity to experience different kinds of cannabis and to realize that when my back is hurting, that getting high, especially getting really high, might not be the best answer. That maybe what I want is something that's gonna, instead of getting me really high, it's gonna help me feel better. It's gonna reduce the pain signaling from where I hurt my back. It's going to relieve some of the pain or anxiety, the anxiety really that's going on in my head about, oh hell, my back hurts again. I'm sure some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Might not be back pain, but many of us live with pain. And type 2 and type 3 cannabis at the right dose. And again, the wide array of chemistry that the cannabis plant can produce, I think most consumers just don't realize that yet. I think most consumers today, when they go into a dispensary or a legal store, I don't like this analogy, but it kind of works. They're looking for high THC. So that's a bit like going into a liquor store and asking for the highest proof alcohol you got. Give me your 190 proof grain alcohol. Well, most people don't want that, but that's what 33% THC flowers are like. I mean, it's a poor analogy because alcohol and cannabis are not the same thing. But for the most part, the consumer still has that viewpoint where they're really looking for the grain alcohol. They want the biggest bang for the buck, and they're missing a lot of the potential joy and quality of life that's possible with finding the product that's going to be right for them. And I think that's really a thing of educating the public. And once they try it, if they are free of the expectation, like go back to Harlequin's story. My patient group was used to what they got from Wade was going to get them high. That wasn't happening. I did not, and I didn't know I needed to make those changes in their expectations. Now I do. And I think that some aspect of the industry, we have to educate the consumer on what's possible. And ideally, someday, enough people would understand that our culture might be more healthy, that we wouldn't have so many of the health problems that we have. We might not have so many veterans who feel a need to take their own lives because their lives don't seem to be working for them right now. And it's tragedy. And I like a saying that I've heard before: be the change you want to see. Make it happen. That's one of the things veterans are good at, getting shit done. And we need to make this happen.
Bless you, sir. Absolutely. Councilmember Armstrong, you have a follow-up question.
I'm not sure it would count as a follow-up question, but I wanted to ask Wade about, so you're talking about different cannabinoids that are going to help people differently. What I found in my journey was, eating cannabis was much better for pain. When I had pain, like you said, if I was smoking cannabis to get results, not only was I getting bad results, sometimes it made you feel like the pain was actually heightened. So I was wondering, if you could go over how that changes. So for example, like most of the medicine you're providing for these patients, I'm assuming is oil, is RSO, and they're eating it. So a lot of us smoke our medicine for our mental health conditions and for our pain. But I found certainly that eating high THC, even though it doesn't really get me high, like really does the job for pain. So long-winded question, if you could just cut into it in some way.
No, that's a great observation, George. And that's my experience as well. And part of that, again, I'll point back to our bodies and how cannabis works in our bodies. When you smoke or vaporize cannabis, the cannabinoids are entering your lungs, and from the lungs, they go straight into the bloodstream, go straight to the brain, because the body is designed to get that oxygen that you just brought in to the brain, because that's the center of all the activity. And that's appropriate. And it's part of, there's benefits to inhaling your cannabis in that it comes on quickly. It's fairly easy to control your dose. For certain conditions and certain situations, it actually seems to help a lot. But to your point about pain, that is my experience as well. If I'm not careful about what I'm smoking and I'm in pain, I can actually make the pain worse. It feels worse because I'm more aware of it. I feel more sensitive, if you will. When you eat or ingest, and I frequently hit on a high potency oil that's titrated into, I think this is an olive oil. It has a little more CBD than THC, but I consume half a dropper full of that a couple times a day because it helps me feel good. It tones down the pain signaling that I rode motorcycle when I was younger. I'm a farmer. I work pretty hard. I like getting stuff done. And yeah, sometimes I pay the price in terms of my body just doesn't feel that. I feel a little bit like the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. And a little bit of oil goes a long way for me. I can move easier. But edibles and sublingual tinctures, because you're ingesting them, they go through a different metabolic pathway from the gut. They go into the bloodstream and then immediately to the liver. And the liver changes delta-9 THC into 11-hydroxycannabinol or something to that effect, 11-hydroxy.
11-hydroxy metabolite.
Thank you, sir. 11-hydroxy has much more profound physical effects than it does mental or emotional effects. At really high doses, it can be pretty debilitating. Most everybody who's been in cannabis very long has a story of somebody they know or maybe themselves. They ate a cookie or a brownie and it was a really good brownie, so they decided to have a couple more with some ice cream. And they had a really horrific night. It happens, and that's an overdose. But at small doses, the right dose for your needs, it's really the way to go. Ingesting cannabis at small doses, finding the sweet spot, the dose, the method of getting it into your body that works for you, you can see pretty dramatic benefit on pain. We've seen a lot of folks reduce their need for opioids and or eliminate them. There's science being done in clinical studies that suggests this is a pretty strong correlation about cannabis use, giving people the opportunity to voluntarily decrease their opioid use. I've heard more than a few folks about that. And circle back to the story I told in our first meeting, the fella who pointed out that Harlequin made his pain go away said something that really struck me. He said, I've been in and out of opioid rehab a bunch of times, Wade. I got access to all kinds of great drugs, legal and illegal. I can get as fucked up as I want. None of them make the pain go away. They make it so I don't care that I'm in pain, but they don't make the pain go away. When I smoke a joint of this, the pain goes away. What are you doing to it? And so that's really a, sort of the lodestone, if you will, of what drives me, that recognition that finding the plant, finding the chemistry, the product, the way of getting it into your body, the dose, the frequency of use that works for you can in fact provide pretty amazing benefits for very little in the way of adverse side effects. I mean, especially when you start looking at some of the pharmaceuticals that get recommended as an alternative for our condition. Oy.
Yeah, it's going to be like that sometimes, You have a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, and, we thought about these questions a little bit, we tried to pull this out of you. Council member Kendra has joined us, and she has a question.
Hi, sorry. I was listening the whole time. I just wasn't visible. What do you think about high CBD hash? It's not common from what I've been told. The CBD strains don't wash through. They don't wash well.
Yes, that's something I recently learned from one of the guests y'all had on your roundtable a little while back. Marcus Richardson talked about how the trichomes, the beautiful mushroom-looking picture that's over Etienne's shoulder there is a trichome, and it's a specific type of trichome that's predominantly where THC is found. And those kind of trichomes break off or wash off of cannabis plant material fairly readily under what I think of as mechanical separation. You can dry sift it, you can water wash it with ice. But CBD is predominantly found in trichomes that are more shaped like a plaque that's kind of stuck to the plant surfaces as versus a mushroom that grows out of a plaque. And so, I never saw real good results in terms of yield from the various CBD plants I might have tried to make hash from. But they do wash real well in high proof cold ethanol. They dissolve pretty readily under those conditions. And then you can extract the alcohol off and you end up with RSO, as it's referred to. I prefer the term full extract cannabis oil or FECO, but much respect to Rick Simpson for putting forth that concept. Because it's a lot what we do. We work with highly potent oils. Ideally, they've been tested. We titrate them down to suit the do that at home. Enough plant material to make it worth. That's another reason that I'm a big fan of folks having the opportunity to grow their own. And if your local jurisdiction doesn't allow it, there's your opportunity for political activism. Get in there and change the rules.
All right, let's see. I have a question that came from one of our council members who's not here tonight. His name is Eric Stamper. And how can you determine the right dose for our bodies? and any testing or technology available to the individual?
What I usually do is when I'm first meeting with a person to sort out what their condition is and what needs they might have, we talk about what is your previous experience with cannabis? Was it good? Was it, if you have no experience, what's your feeling about the possibility that you might get stoned? Because I really like to have some CBD and THC together. Almost always, especially if a person is new to cannabis, because we're working with ingesting as versus smoking, I spend some time making sure they understand how to dose the preparation that we've made for them. And it almost always, especially if they're new to cannabis, it'll be a fairly weak titration or dilution of that high potency oil. And we'll start off with literally a couple of drops. And if they're having trouble defining what I mean by that, I'll literally take the product that I've made for them, childproof caps, put some like this, and literally just put a couple of drops on my hand. Can you see that? Yeah, a couple of drops, and lick it off. Hold it in your mouth. Don't swallow, just hold it. Savor the taste. Hopefully you like the taste. Has a peppery sort of lovely flavor. And then make sure they understand, don't do that again for hours. See how it feels to you. Maybe wait till you know, like I usually ask them, do it on a day when you don't need to do anything else. First thing in the morning, if you like to have a cup of coffee and a little breakfast, do that, then do this, and wait until lunch before you even think about taking any more. And even if you do take more, do the same thing. Don't increase the dose. Stay with that same dose, because that first dose is still in your body, still having effects in your body, and you're fixing to double the dose. So, and in that way, over time, in a period of days, most people with guidance, usually takes some guidance, because I've had people think that they were supposed to take 2 droppers full instead of 2 drops, and that didn't work out well for that person. But yeah, they have to sort out for themselves how to find the dose that works for them. And usually, especially if they're new to cannabis, I explain to them what feeling psychoactivity might be like. And if they start realizing, oh, this must be what he's talking about, to really look at it honestly. Does this feel okay? Is this all right? If that's the case, then maybe you've found your sweet spot, the dose that works for you. Ideally, they might have noticed some of the more subtle effects. Maybe their pain has receded because they've been doing it for a day now. They've had 3 or 4 doses, and maybe their pain is a little less. Maybe their appetite's increased. Maybe their mood is a little better. These are all subtle things that are benefits that are possible, but are not as easily observed as psychoactivity. So one of the things that I shoot for is guiding them to the point where they can find the dose that gives them the benefit they're seeking without psychoactivity that becomes uncomfortable or keeps them from feeling like they can go to the grocery store or work with their children or do their job. Does that make sense? That sum it up in a way that makes sense?
Absolutely. It's things I've always taught people is, get a diary, notate everything, how you feel beforehand, when did you feel onset, mark time, so that there's little things so that when you come out of the experience that you can go back to, so that, I can absolutely agree with you on your dosage, start off light, start off easy, We've all seen the horrors of people going way too far, way too fast. Even a gentleman ate one of those, little decadoses on an airplane and stripped off all his clothes and ran up and down the aisles. So, that's real world, not kidding you. It's funny to laugh at. However, that's bad dosage, people not knowing themselves, and also environment. Environment is key. You have, you don't do these things and go to amusement parks. You can, but you had better be very experienced. It's not for the novice. This is healing. This is medicine. So, do it at home, do it in safety, but document it, because that documentation you can take to your therapist, your doctor, and you can start building therapy around your usage as you find it. But what do you find with certain genetics that there is a certain aspect of titration or acclimatization after a certain amount of time, that possible rotation of different types of cannabis may be effective in certain therapies, Wade?
Let me start off by saying, I'll get to your question in a second, but your point about journaling, keeping a written record of what's going on and your experience, is a really, really, really good suggestion. Because, well, it is. I'll leave it at that. It's an excellent suggestion, and it's something that more folks could benefit from doing. It's something that we encourage folks to do, especially when you've got profound issues. And to your question, give it to me again, please. Sorry.
I think I forgot my question too. Sorry, I was just medicating there.
People getting acclimated.
Yes,
right?
acclimatization after a certain amount of time of usage, acclimatization can matter, which is why we teach people how to rotate certain genetics into their fields and operations, because after a certain amount of, as you know, the basic psychology of cannabis, a neophyte user who is just starting into cannabis, if you look at it at a 30-day span, that first 7 to 10 days, psychologically, they're going to get as high as they're going to get if they're going to have some sort of reaction. Then afterwards, it starts tapering back to their regular cognitive level. However, I've known when I have grown one specific genetic in a garden, and that's all I had, I noticed after a month or a month and a half or so, for some reason, it doesn't have the overall profound effect. So teaching people to search for multiple cultivars that they respond to positively is something that I recommend to people. Do you agree with that assessment, or what are your thoughts on the matter and your experiences, especially with those that have severe illnesses? Do they not acclimate, or do they arrive at an acclimatization as well?
Great question. And not a simple answer. Yes, people get acclimated to a specific version of cannabis. Some of that has to do with how often you're using it, how much does your body need it, what are the effects that you're seeking from using it. But I think anyone who's had access to large quantity of the same plant material for a period of time has had the experience you described, Etienne. It is a thing that happens. I'll say this, in the realm of seizures, what we shoot for is when we find a cultivar that works well for a person, we try and find cultivars that have similar chemistry, similar terpenes, similar cannabinoids. They're going to be different because they are different. But if you can find something that has at least some similarities, we often see some benefit that carries over. May not be as effective as the one, but it can give a bridge to allow the body to reset. The other thing that I like to point to, it's not real popular, but it makes a big difference is if you find that you're getting acclimated to what you have and you don't have access to anything else, taking a break, stopping for even a day can make a big difference in how your body experiences it. And I've heard in talking with physiologists that if you really want to reset your endocannabinoid system, allow 2 to 3 weeks of fasting from cannabis use, and then you'll get a whole new experience when you start up again. But in my experience, taking even a day off can make a big difference if you have no other options than what you've got. The other thing you could do is, for example, if you've been smoking one thing for a period of time, maybe take a batch of it and make an edible with it. Get a different method of ingestion and getting it into your body. You might find it a renewed potency experience. That's kind of all I got on that. But yeah, it's a thing. It does happen. But you can get really dramatic benefit if you can discontinue use even for a day.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Wade. I would like to thank our council members, Michael Krawitz, George Armstrong, Kendra Billersawi, Alex Popoff, and Wade. Needless to say, we forward to having you around and more often. And because, like people hear you and see you and they don't realize that you're a veteran. And it's not something because of our service. It's not something that comes to the forefront in my work. It has in time. But most people are like, wait, you were a veteran? Oh, wow. That's really surprising to me. So you don't seem the type is what I get. Anyone else get that same situation?
Well, full disclosure here, I'm of the era of the draft, and I was one of those folks who won that draft lottery that started happening. My number was 34. So I had high likelihood of being drafted and ending up at that point, we had about 450,000 draftees in country in Vietnam. And there was no way in hell I wanted to go there. Like I said, I had a guy I looked up to who lived right next door to me when I was just starting high school. We moved into a new house, and the kid next door was just finishing high school. He enlisted in the Marine Corps, went right to Vietnam, came back in a body bag. And in the meantime, I'd had a chance to get to know him for like a year and a half. And it really affected me, man. It was like, holy shit, this is crazy. We're sending people off to die in the jungle. So anyway, I feel deep respect for this group, for the work you've done and are continuing to do. And yeah, I really look forward to more opportunities to interact with all of you. You're doing a special thing, people. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your work and your dedication and your continued work and dedication. And we look forward to what we're able to do together. So thank you, everybody, for joining us for this special edition of our Veterans Action Roundtable with Wade Laughter. And we'll be back in 2 weeks. We're going to have a nice discussion with Michael and a group regarding the United Nations and what's transpiring at the international level. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk to you soon.
The Veterans Action Council is a PACE Radio Network content provider.
You're listening to the PACE Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partners 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at Pace Radio.